I also want to thank our host, Niagara Foundation, which I think makes a unique contribution to the city by bringing people from all walks of life in this city to talk about human things, things about human, which is really appreciated by the diplomatic community here as well. So I thank you for this opportunity given to me. So today I'll talk about Turkish foreign policy, an update on Turkish foreign policy. I'll try to be as candid as possible and as less boring as possible. And within that framework, I'll just want to deal with, touch upon the basic principles that guides our foreign policy. JFK once said that the purpose of foreign policy is not to provide an outlet for our own sentiments of hope or indignation. It's to shape real events in the world. So 2 decades after the end of the Cold War, no new international system has been established yet. And Turkey, being at the very center of all this real world that JFK refers to, that real world, is trying to do its best in terms of promoting international peace, security, and prosperity in its region. So before I go to the principles that guide us in our foreign policy, I just want to have a look at at Turkey in the post-Cold War era, how we describe Turkey's position, and what are the basic elements of Turkey's situation and position in the world affairs in terms of the post-Cold War era. First, as we left behind the first decade of the new century, there's a new Turkey in the world scene as the 17th largest economy in the world and 6th largest economy in Europe, with a continuously growing market for investment. Turkey is somewhat on its way joining the ranks of major global actors in terms of many parameters. And secondly, Turkey is currently facing a pressure, if I can use that term, to assume an important regional role, which admittedly has created some tensions between its current strategic alliances and some of the regional dynamics in its region. So it somehow created a sort of tension between our strategic allies, our relations with our strategic allies, and relations in our region. And we have faced these challenges, in fact, starting with immediately after the end of the Cold War. This started with the war in the Balkans, war in the Middle East, and in fact, with all these challenges, Turkey tries to remain committed to establishing harmony between its current strategic alliances and its neighbors, which is quite important for us. And this is the second, in fact, element of what Turkey looks like in the post-Cold War era. And the third thing about Turkey is Turkey's unique demographic composition is increasingly being influenced by its foreign policy vision. So if I can annotate it, for example, the number of Bosnians in Turkey are more than the number of Bosnians in Bosnia. Or the number of Albanians in Turkey is more than the number of Albanians in Kosovo. And we can continue with that. It goes with the Chechens, it goes with the Albans, it goes with Georgians. In fact, my wife is Georgian origin, and for 3 generations they have been living in Turkey. So it somehow highlights the interconnection of Turkey and its region, which is quite unique for Turkey and unique for our region. So this such a demographic composition definitely affects your domestic policies as well. So it's not only a foreign policy consideration, it's also a domestic policy consideration for Turkey. And and this has increased after the end of the Cold War, especially with all those, challenges that we have faced in our region, because those populations in our country made a pressure on the governments that they should not stand by and they should not stand idly when all those developments are taking place in their region. So that's why the governments have started to take, active policies when it comes to regional issues in our region. And final element, the fourth element that defines Turkey in the post-Cold War era is something that does not change, which is very key and which is very important for us. It's the European Union and NATO. These continue to be the main fixtures of Turkey's foreign policy. And they are the main elements of continuity in our foreign policy. So what we see in the post-Cold War era is a foreign policy vision based on a better understanding of the real world around ourselves, the realities of the new century, even if we use very obsolete elements in implementing this, which are the historical role and geographical position of Turkey. In this sense, Turkey's orientation and strategic alliance with the West remains perfectly compatible with our involvement in our region, in Iraq, in Iran, in the Caucasus, in the Middle East, and even in Afghanistan. So these two concepts, our strategic alliance with the West and our involvement in the region, we think complement each other. And we have to be able to implement policies that complement each other. So this is the Turkey that I see in the post-Cold War era, in fact. And when it comes to principles of Turkish foreign policy, which affect these policies, I have to divide it into 3 methodological principles and 5 operational principles. I'll go very quickly over them. What are these principles that guide us? The first methodological principle is Turkey's visionary approach to the issues instead of the crisis-oriented attitude that dominated the Cold War. So we were basically reacting to certain crises back in the Cold War, but now we have a vision of our own, and that makes us much more active. That makes Turkey much more visible. But visibility brings with itself some responsibilities, which we are quite aware of, I should say. So if I can, exemplify them, for example, Turkey's Lebanon policy, or its attempt to achieve Palestinian reconciliation, or its attempt to have the Sunnis in Iraq in the 2005 elections, or constructive involvement in Iranian nuclear issue, or these are all visions, of course, for the Middle East, and we can enlarge it for different areas, for the Caucasus, for Afghanistan, for Balkans. So the responsibility is huge, I should say. So this is the first methodological principle, and the second methodological principle is to base Turkish foreign policy on a consistent and systematic framework around the world. What I mean with the consistent and systematic is that your policies in some other world should not contradict your policies in another region. It's very tough. We're not defined with one region. So we have multiple regional identities. Turkey becomes a Balkan country. It may become a Caucasian country, or it may become a Middle Eastern country. When it comes to be a European country, we are a member of NATO, and we're trying to accede to EU. So you see, we have multiple identities that we have to make them work with each other. So this is another important principle in us, that we have to, put it in a very consistent and systematic framework. The third methodological principle is adoption of a new diplomatic or discourse, or I should say diplomatic style, which has resulted in the spread of Turkish soft power in its region. Of course, Turkey has one of the biggest militaries in the world, but you don't see us making threats around with that military. What you have seen recently, especially, is that we are trying to put into diplomacy the leverage that we have through our civil and economic power, which is quite important. So this is in fact a different type of diplomacy. You don't see that many nations when they have so huge military powers that go around without making any references to their military power. I make this reference here to that military just to underline the fact that we don't use it. We just use other elements, which is nowadays what's described as the soft power of a country, frankly speaking. That's what defines the soft power of a country. You should exclude your military power aside and think about civil and economic terms when you talk about it. So it's the third important methodological principle when it comes to Turkey's foreign policy. So from these three methodological approaches, 5 operational principles guide Turkey's foreign policy making process. So these are elements of, these are the principles that are affected by those 3 methodological ones. When it comes to them, I should start maybe with the first principle of balancing security and democracy in Turkey, which is quite important when it comes to foreign policy issues. The legitimacy of any regime depends on its ability to balance democracy and security of the country, which is quite important for its citizens. So the security should not be at the expense of freedoms and human rights in the country. So that's what Turkey is nowadays doing, and Turkey has made great strides in protecting civil liberties, despite serious domestic political challenges in the country, especially terrorism. And Turkey does this balance in a world, in a post-9/11 world, where civil liberties has been constrained at the very in the very democratic countries. So Turkey is trying to hit that balance in its domestic affairs, which definitely affects its foreign policy, which is quite important for us. So the second operational principle is the zero problem policy towards our neighbors, which we have been successfully implementing during the last 7 or 8 years. What's the difference between the post-Cold War Turkey and the Cold War Turkey is that Turkey is nowadays, following a more cooperative track when it comes to its neighbors, and there is an improving economic interdependence between Turkey and its neighbors, which is something that we highly value, to increase our interdependence with our neighbors. That's one of the keys that you can, have zero problems with your neighbors. In 2009, for example, we achieved considerable diplomatic progress when it comes to our relations with Armenia. In fact, which nevertheless remains the most problematic relationship in Turkey's policy as to its neighbors. But when it comes to the policy with the neighbors, we have 12 neighbors, and I include the ones that we have through Black Sea as well, like Ukraine. So out of the 12, only 4 of them are Muslim countries. So our zero problem policy has got nothing to do with ideology, with religion, or other things. It's got to do with the historical context that is provided by us, with our huge, rich history, and some geographical realities that we have to live in that region. So that's what it is. That is something that you can really touch. It's real. It's the real realities in the field. That motivates us to implement these policies. And frankly speaking, we were so encouraged by the response that we got from our neighbors that we have started, established new things, which are novelties in the international relations, I should say. We have established some strategic high-level council meetings. These are basically Council of Ministers meetings that we jointly hold with our neighbors. We hold them with Greece, with Russia, with Iraq. So these are really novelties in international relations. So you're holding joint Council of Ministers meeting with your neighbors. And we're trying to establish the same with Ukraine, Bulgaria in the coming days. So this is one of the main principles that definitely guide us. And the third main principle is being proactive and to act preemptively when it comes to peace in your region. When I talk about peace in the region, main thing that comes to mind is Middle East, definitely. And you see Turkey again in the recent years very active when it comes to, bringing together sites in Lebanon or bringing together sites in Iraq, bringing Israel and Syria together. And when you go outside of the Middle East, you see Turkey again bringing together Bosnia and Serbia. You see again Turkey bringing Afghanistan and Pakistan together. And you see now Turkey is hosting in a couple of days the meeting of the International Committee with Iran in Istanbul about this nuclear issues. So you see Turkey much more proactive in its region when it comes to taking initiatives to establish peace in its region, which is quite important, how we define ourselves nowadays. And the fourth one, which is multidimensional foreign policy, and it has some links with that previous principle that I have told you, is when I say multidimensional policy, is that Turkey's global actions are complementary to each other, not in contradiction or not in competition. These are important things for us. So what we basically say that is our relations with US or EU shouldn't prevent us from, intensifying our relations with Russia or having a partnership with Russia, which definitely helps EU and US, in fact. Or our great ties with EU and US shouldn't prevent us from, intensifying our relations with our neighbor, Syria, which is, again, an asset for the West. So we are acting on the part of the West as a mediatory to engage Syria, which is something to be appreciated, I think. So this is one of the main principles, again, to implement this multidimensional policy. It's really hard, and you may get a lot of criticisms about it. But we want to take the challenge of trying to establish such relations, and take the challenge of, facing those criticisms, which is quite important for us. And the fifth and the last operational principle is what our ministers call as rhythmic diplomacy. Rhythmic diplomacy is, since our minister is an academician, he comes with such definitions, but I like them. The idea behind this rhythmic diplomacy is that we are trying to include Turkey in every international fora possible. In every international organization, you see Turkey. And you may not find it always very relevant, but we find it relevant, and we see that it helps to the dynamics that we see in the global affairs. Again, to give you examples, of course, it's natural to see Turkey as the chairman of Southeast European cooperation process in the Southeastern Europe, in the Balkans. And you see another Turkey as a member of OIC, Organization of Islamic Conference. And you see Turkey as a member of NATO. And you see Turkey again as an active observer in African Union, taking active initiatives in the Arab League. You see Turkey taking really courageous steps when it comes to Kyoto Protocol. So you see Turkey everywhere that is relevant today, which is an interesting part of our foreign policy. We want to make sure that it's understood that Turkey is relevant to whatever we talk about in terms of global affairs. And we want to provide our added value in that respect, which is an asset, we think, that the international community should capitalize. So, in fact, these principles demonstrate, I guess, a new perspective, as you can see. One that's based on vision, soft power, a universal language, I should say, and implementation of consistent foreign policies in different parts of the world. So to sum up, we have a rich historical and geographical heritage. That's something that's, I guess, appreciated by everyone, that rich historical and geographical heritage. We also have a profound consciousness about the value of peace and security in global affairs. So we are quite aware of the importance of these concepts as well. So when you have that rich heritage of geography and history, and that consciousness that peace should be upheld in the world affairs, you have that responsibility. You feel that responsibility, whatever you do in world affairs. So we're quite aware of that responsibility. And we act, and we take a great pride in acting accordingly with this understanding. That's basically what I can tell. I know I'm very passionate about this, but this framework really is the key behind every step that Turkish diplomats take in the field. It includes me as well. I mean, I always find a relevance for myself in the mid of America to make this foreign policy relevant for starting with this region of the United States, and try to implement this. The key for me is to make Turkey visible and relevant in this part of the United States. And what we think is that if every Turkish diplomat can do this in its own responsibility area, so these will come up and will definitely serve as new, let's say, leverages for Turkish foreign policy, and for our leaders that try to come up with this the idea of a responsible Turkey as a responsible partner in world affairs. So that's basically what we are, and that, I should say, will complete my presentation about Turkey and its foreign policy. And I kept a part of it for question and answers. I'll definitely love to hear your questions.
You described the objective of consistency in this attempt in a very complex world and region to apply consistent policy. If you could focus on the Israel-Palestinian issue, what are Turkey's foreign policy objectives at this point moving forward as it relates to the Israeli government, the Palestinian Authority, Hamas, and Hezbollah?
Let me start with Turkey-Israel relations. We are the first Muslim country that recognizes Israel, and we are the second when it comes after United States. When it comes when we apply this to the world scale, so we were the second country that recognized Israel. And the relations between Israel and Turkey does not start with 1948. It goes back 500 years back. So the relations between, we're talking basically about relations between Turkish people and Jewish people, which is described in very cordial terms. And we have been able to maintain this relation between these two countries, between a Muslim country and Israel, in a region where conflict has never ceased to exist. So, in fact, at that point, since we have been able to handle this relation in a very tactful way, not only Turkey but Israel as well, we want to see our Israeli friends to cooperate with us in that respect as well. That's why we came up with the idea of Israel and Syria talks. That's what that was the main idea behind it. Because as Kissinger says, you can make war in Middle East without Egypt. You cannot make peace in Middle East without Syria. So that was very important for us. So you cannot really isolate the Israeli-Palestinian issue from other elements of politics in Middle East. So that was the comprehensive approach that we have always tried to explore. So that was the reason that we approached Palestinian and Israeli issues from that perspective. This may include Iran as well, which is there through some proxies in the region, as you can imagine. So, in fact, this is the state-to-state part of the issue, but there is a part that is very much relevant to the public in the region, the grievances of the Palestinian people, and those grievances bring certain realities with them, like the presence of Hamas, or it may be defined in a different way, but the presence of Hezbollah in Lebanon. So these are, again, the realities of that region that we are trying to, bring all those parties that are, undeniable ingredients of a possible solution in the region. So we cannot simply isolate one of those basic elements in the region and say that we will establish peace in the Middle East. So that's where Turkey wants to play a role. That's where Turkey has played a role so far, to be a party that everyone can talk in the region, which is very rare in our region, which is very rare when it comes to countries who are also allies with EU and US. So this is the leverage that we want to capitalize on. But of course, some other developments in the region restricted our ability to do so far, especially since June. We have been, when we talk about Turkey, the two things come up always in the region. One is the no vote in Iran in nuclear program, and the second one is the flotilla issue. But we want to see more long-term, let's say, visions when it comes to Turkey's role in the Middle East. So we just want to overcome these and put aside all these, exclusive approaches to Turkey's role in the Middle East. Yes.
I read the other day that Iran was blocking energy from getting into Afghanistan. What is your relationship with Iran?
Yes, that's what,
Winter is upon them, and a lot of people are cold and cannot get their goods moved from one place to another. I was wondering.
Yeah, that's one of the main issues in our region. That's what my reply was to the question about Pakistan as well. you see not only Iran but Russians at certain times using the energy issue as a kind of leverage in the regional politics. That's an undeniable reality, and I appreciate the fact that since that's an asset in the hands of these countries, it's a part of the real politics that they may apply. They may resort to using that as a kind of leverage when it comes to relations with the countries in the region, that interdependence. So what we're trying to do is to increase and diversify that level of interdependence between the regional countries. So that's why we are not trying to, we're doing our best not to have Iran or Russia monopolize the energy market in our region. So that's why we're trying to diversify the resources of energy in our region and the ways that those energy are being distributed to the world. Otherwise, we will be facing these things, which is unfortunate, and which is unfortunate because of the fact that Afghanistan needs the help of the international community at this point in time. So that's the reason that our cooperation with Pakistan in that respect is very much relevant. Our cooperation with India is very much relevant in that respect. And frankly speaking, countries that may share this idea in this point may find, other avenues of cooperation, and this may create a dynamic to create other areas of cooperation between each other, and this may apply for India and Pakistan as well. India and Pakistan, cooperating when it comes to energy issues, which is quite important for us, and this may go all up to the north. That's a very important development, in fact, and we are trying to avoid such developments in our region. Yes.
The WikiLeaks
Yes.
incident has received a lot of attention
Yes.
from the news media, but I think that as a professional colleague of Secretary Clinton, you must have a unique perspective
Yes.
of it. Is there anything of it that you can share with us?
Yes, sure. Yes, I mean, embassy in Ankara is still the number one when it comes to leaks. So we're definitely very much relevant again when it comes to the WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks is, of course, unfortunate for diplomacy, for the profession that we are doing nowadays. That's why now I'm not, writing back anything to Ankara about my personal impressions, and that in fact takes the taste away from the profession that we are doing. To write down certain reports with the fear that someday in time, somebody will read them and use it against you is quite discouraging. But this happened. This happened when. During the first Gulf crisis, when CNN was broadcasting to the whole world what's happening in Baghdad, okay, that took away this that taste of diplomacy that the embassies in Baghdad were not very much looked into when it comes to the latest developments. So that's a part of the globalization. I can appreciate this, but this is somewhat different. Again, we have a globalization part because of the electronic world. Now all those leaks are everywhere. We're just updating ourselves every day about it, and frankly speaking, it's not good to see countries using these leaks against each other. It definitely will affect diplomacy, but it didn't stop yet. We don't know where it will stop. But it will definitely, affect the way that diplomacy is done. It's a kind of, earthquake for how we do this job.
Now, I know that this wouldn't happen in the Foreign Office of Turkey, but is it possible or conceivable that in some foreign departments of other countries,
Yes.
that there may be some Schadenfreude?
Thank you for excluding Turkey from this. Yeah, it may be the case. You never know. And I mean, this is diplomacy. I mean, and it's up to how you interpret this profession. In fact, there is not a book how we do diplomacy. You know, open page 2040 and look what happens when WikiLeaks appears. No, there is not such a book. So everyone has their own book, frankly speaking, about this, and it comes with the tradition of diplomacy. And thank you for accepting that. We have a very short but very decent tradition of diplomacy when it comes to Turkish Republic, and we're well known with our diplomatic courtesy and the basic rules, basic principles of diplomacy. When it comes to that, we simply shy away from giving nicknames or other things when it comes to our partners in the field. We use their names, and that's what we do, frankly. But thank you for coming with that appreciation about us.
Any more questions?
Yes.
How do you see the relation between Turkey and the EU and the progress of Turkey being included to the EU?
Okay. EU, yes.
That was my question.
Yes. I can't escape that question. So, yes, EU.
Cyprus at the same time.
Yes, Cyprus, okay. What's more? EU is, I mean, Europe is not what we say is not a geography for us. It's not about religion, it's not about geography, it's not about how those countries in that region define themselves. It's not that arbitrary to define Europe. Europe is an idea, that's what we think. And that's what we have been always, telling to our friends in Europe and to our American friends as well. And we need their help in certain respects that accession of Turkey EU is the main pillar for Turkey's motivation when it comes to matters regarding human rights, democracy, rule of law, market economy. EU means this to us. So in the past, some people came up with the idea that, this is a civilizational project. If this means that, EU represents a civilizational project which is very much relevant to Christianity or some other things, or anything that is excluding the certain countries in terms of religion, race, whatever, then EU is no more a civilizational project. You cannot come up with that claim. Because when we talk about civilization, that's what we're trying to emphasize in the post-Cold War, or in the post-Cold War, and in post-9/11, that there is only one civilization, which is the human civilization, which is the key for the development of the common good of the human. That's what we are trying to do when we are, coming up with so insistently that we want to be a member of the EU. We want to complement that civilizational project, but we don't want to complement the civilization project in the quotation marks, I should say, because that is not something that we can appreciate or we can understand. So we want to see EU as a civilization project of the human race. That's how we approach it. Of course, we're not that naive, and we appreciate the fact that it is really difficult when it comes for EU to make that decision to include Turkey in it or not, because it is a decision that will affect the nature of EU, and it's a hard decision, but they had plenty of time to think about it, I guess. And we still have, we still give them time to think about it, to ponder about it. When it comes to deepening and enlarging EU is another issue that EU even discusses among themselves. So that's a part of the problem. And Cyprus, you cannot, detach Cyprus issue anymore from EU, which is unfortunate. That's what we said when the accession of Cyprus was brought into the agenda, that if you have Cyprus in EU, then you will be a party to the Cyprus problem. That's what we said to our colleagues in the EU. But contrary to our advices or recommendations, they insist to act in that way. So Cyprus is a part and parcel of Cyprus issue now, a part and parcel of Turkey's EU accession process, which is unfortunate. I mean, it may not be in the papers, but it is something that we, experience every day when it comes to negotiations with our EU friends for the accession of Turkey to EU. But anyway, we will live with it, and we have the intention to solve this problem. We know that this is one of the keys to having that single Europe. We have the intention, but the thing that we don't like is that it's being used against us during this negotiation process. It's not something that any country will appreciate when it comes to diplomacy negotiation.
In diplomacy, Turkey is described as the country of Turkey is the farthest west of the east and farthest east of the west, farthest south of the north, farthest north of the south.
Yes, a lot of it.
And of course, this brings a great responsibility in the region. And the Turkish Foreign Minister, His Excellency Davutoğlu, brought a new ideology in Turkish foreign policy, as you mentioned in your speech, the zero problem with neighbors. And of course, with this responsibility, Turkish Foreign Ministry would like to have zero problem with the neighbors. But this foreign policy ideology has been criticized by the West and by some in Turkey as Turkey facing to East because it was not accepted to EU. And my first question is, do you agree with these critics? And the second question is, will Turkey really be accepted in EU? And if yes or no, in the next 5-10 years, will Turkey need EU because it's a rising power economically, politically, and is being a leader in the region?
Yes, thank you. In fact, the principles that I have outlined during my presentation will serve sort of an answer to this question when it comes to this, so-called shift of axis of Turkish foreign policy. I should highlight maybe that Turkey's Western orientation has always been very much relevant to Turkish people. Our Western orientation is in the heart of the Turkish people. So you cannot, detach a country's foreign policy from its people. So when you ask Turkish people whether you want to be a member of that big part of the world, but West, yes, the answer is yes. Western orientation is irreversible in Turkey. So I really don't find these claims that Turkey is experiencing a shift of axis in its foreign policy when it comes to its orientation to West. It's unjustifiable. So I have tried to explain that the thing about Turkey is that Turkey wants to make its presence in Middle East, in Caucasus, in Balkans, relevant to EU and United States, which there is nothing wrong about it. And when it comes to relations with the neighbors, I always ask my American friends whether they will give up one of their neighbors. It's just hard. When I ask you to get rid of Mexico or Canada, it's really hard. If we have to live with these neighbors in the near future and in the long term, then we should at least be given the opportunity to be able to engage these neighbors. There's nothing wrong with engaging with your neighbors. It's maybe something good for the West that we're engaging them. Otherwise, the only option is isolating them, which is not good. Which means that you take for granted that there is no chance of gaining or winning these neighbors, which is something unacceptable for us. We don't want to give up on our neighbors before trying every opportunity. The issue about the EU, yes, I mean, in 2023 we will be celebrating the centennial of Turkey. It's our least expectation that we will be a member of EU by then. I mean, celebrate it together with our European colleagues. But of course, I mean, in 2003, Turkey celebrating its centennial will be something quite different what we have from today. It's 13 years later I'm talking about. When you look at Turkey 13 years ago from now on, it's a different Turkey again. And there is a huge dynamic there. And you don't know where Turkey will end up there. People are talking about those BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and Turkey, and to some extent South Korea as well, is seen as the next generation or next wave of BRICS. We're trying to see certain indications of that. Some call it as self-esteem in our foreign policy, but it's just because of the realpolitik in the region, because of the realities in the region. But of course, this will bring with itself some unique approaches or some approaches that are exclusively belonging to Turkey, which may raise some eyebrows again. I don't know at some point, but we just want to be functional and operational when it comes to promoting peace, security, and prosperity in the global affairs. That's what we're trying to do in the world affairs. If they want us to be relevant, if they want us to be operational when it comes to defining EU itself as a global entity in the world of politics, they should, I mean, it will be to their interest to have Turkey by 2023. Of course, earlier will be better, but that's my belief that we just want them to make that decision. Otherwise, Turkey will go ahead with its own dynamics, and it's really hard to digest certain things. But we're digesting them, and real politics makes us digest all these facts. So everything will definitely define each other, and we want it to be a reciprocal process when it comes to defining our goals, the goal of EU and goals of Turkey, which are even by now are the same.
We've started today with a wonderful speech. I want to thank Consul General once again for coming to Niagara Foundation. And one addition to your
treasury. I never get to have such big work.